So in my video about the mental training and mental aspect of sports, I talked about how I really think a child's upbringing has a lot to do with the mental stability in a sport, mental capabilities in a sport. And so I guess the question would be, why do I think, or how do I think that, and why, and what is it that I think influences that? Well, I think there's a lot of things. I think a lot of it has to do with parenting, and parents need to recognize that every single day that you have your child is a lesson for the child. And there's a lesson all the time, constantly, everything, no matter what you're doing. You could be picking your nose, your kid's looking at you, he's learning. You know, dad picks his nose when he has something up in his nose, so why don't I? But I think where we fail greatly in society is that we don't recognize that every moment of every day is a lesson. And on top of that, when a child figures out, you know, certain things and certain values that you know, or certain problems that should be rewarded with positive reinforcement, and not just positive reinforcement, but further problems for them to figure out, further problems for them to decipher, and for them to, you know, be intrigued by and have to work on, so that the kid, the child growing up, recognizes that there's always something that you have to improve upon. That's how life is. And I think the failure is that, you know, a lot of people will give their kids whatever they want. You know, and I hear this all the time from parents. It blows me away. Parents will say, I don't get why he doesn't want to train. I gave him everything he wanted growing up. I gave him all the support he could have ever had. I gave him, whenever he wanted something, I gave that to him, and now he's turning his back on me, and he doesn't want to train. Well, here's the problem. Your kid doesn't want to train because you're the one who wants him to be an elite athlete. But when you were raising him, you weren't raising him or her properly, because you were giving them everything he wanted. You gave him the most expensive shoes that he wanted. You gave him the $20 pair of Nike socks that he wanted. You gave him the Xbox Live or whatever it's called now. You gave him the brand new computer. You gave him a new iPhone, whatever came out that year. You gave him, you know, an iPad, so when he was at home, and there's no accountability held, and there's nothing that teaches that child, like, okay, you know, one, you have to respect things, and you have to constantly be figuring things out, and you have to be working towards something. But the other thing is that I see is that, you know, the parents who tend to do that, they're also the same parents that when their child is faced with an issue, or, you know, something difficult, a difficult problem, you know, like your kid's learning how to tie a shoe or something. Or with my son, like, you know, I like to teach him how to memorize things because he's only 3, and that's a very important skill for a child, is to learn the skill of memorization. That's very important, and it's a very good task for him to take upon himself. And when a lot of these parents will say, oh, Johnny can't figure this out, I'll help him, I'll do it for him. Well, it's not always, you don't want to always help him. You don't always need to do it for him. Just because he can't tie a shoe doesn't mean you buy him Velcro shoes. You know, you show him every time, this is how you tie your shoe. Every time, every fucking time he's tying his shoe, you gotta say, this is what I'm doing. Because you know what? By the 10,000th time, he's gonna figure out, this is how I tie my shoe because I watched Dad do it. But that's the thing, is that as far as the mental aspect of sports in relation to this, is that kids grow up and everything's spoon-fed to them. They don't work for something because mom and dad always bought them the most expensive shoes. They didn't have to work for it. They bought them a brand new freaking car when they were 16. They didn't have to work for it. They bought them brand new shoes. They didn't have, you know, or brand new expensive jeans that are $130 jeans. You didn't have to work for it. All these things constantly influence your child and what their mental capacity is going to be, not only in sports, but in life. So someone who is raised and is constantly appreciating the lessons learned and happy when they solve something themselves, they tend to handle stress better when they get older, and they tend to handle difficult situations in sports, and they can handle decision making because they've been doing this their entire life. It's commonplace. And I think that's the big thing, is that when your kid accomplishes something when they're little, it's not, oh, you did this, here, I'm going to get you, you know, ice cream. We're going to go get ice cream now to make you happy. No, your kid accomplished that. You make them happy by telling them you're proud of them. You know, with my son, I'll use my son as an example. When I have memorized the Great Lakes. When he memorized the Great Lakes, the first night, he told me all 5 of them. And I laughed and I smiled and I said, Lincoln, I'm really proud of you that you do this. He's like, yeah, I'm so proud. I'm proud, Dad. And that's, you know, people laugh, but that's things that are imprinted on his brain. That's what makes him happy. That's support, not buying some shoe, not getting some jeans, not getting some iPad, not getting a new phone, not getting a brand new freaking car that he never even worked for. So, and that all leads to later on, when they're dealing with stress in sports, in life, in their business or whatever, can they handle it? Well, is it constantly reinforcing them growing up? And I guess that's my whole thing, is that the important factor is to reinforce lessons and the value of lessons by telling kids, you know, you're happy they did that. But it's also just, you know, when my son was 2 years old, he could ride a bike. He could balance on a bike when he was 2 years old. He didn't give a rat's ass that I was proud of him that he could ride his freaking bike when he was 2 years old. He didn't care that I cared. He cared that he could catch up to his cousin, who was 7, 8 years old, to his other cousins that are, you know, 1.5 to 3 years older than him. That's what he cared about. He cared about the fact that he could stay and play with them and ride his bike around and catch up to them because they were so much faster than him. But now he could do that, and that made him feel good. And those are lessons, I think, that are very, very important. It's not giving them stuff. It's giving them an experience and a lesson that they learned from that experience. That is what's important, and that is what is failing in our society. It's pathetic to watch these kids. So when people come in and ask me, I gave him everything he wanted. Well, there's your problem. Your problem's not right now. Your problem was fucking 10 years ago. So that's where, you know, if your family value is external reward that isn't meaningful, then you're going to be faced with some problems as far as development in sports and development in life and development in relationships with people. But if your family values are based around in positive and negative reinforcement, and based around criticism of what they're doing, but also positive construction or instruction, and saying, look, you know, maybe you should try this, or maybe you should do that. And your family values are based around the reward being that they solved that they did something, that they accomplished something, and they're proud of themselves and you're proud of them. That's it. They don't need more. That's all it is. If that's how you raise your child, and they are proud of their accomplishments and they aren't looking for something, that's when you're going to have a kid that can really, really appreciate and focus mentally as they grow older. And I talked about Ryan Whiting in the last video and how he grew up, you know, and he was always calm and collected. And I suspect that that's how his parenting was, is that I remember reading an article about him, how he grew up and his mom would wake up at 4 a.m. and she'd ask him what he wanted for breakfast, and he'd say a cheeseburger. But he saw her waking up at 4 a.m. and doing work and working and appreciating the fact that she was working. He appreciated the fact that she had to do work to accomplish something, pay the bills or whatever. And that's the thing, is instilling that work ethic is also a huge factor. When your kid grows up and sees that, I'll use my own example again. I don't think I'm a great parent, but I think there's certain lessons I do a good job with. And I think, Lincoln comes out with me to feed the chickens every day. Every day. He comes out when I throw, all the time. Because he comes to work with me every day. I like the fact that he sees me working, and that is part of life. So I think those are all factors you have to take in. I know this ended up being a pretty long video, but those are all things I really, really value and I really find to be important in life and in the development of society, and especially in your family, and what are your family goals, and what are your, it's not that I want Lincoln to be this elite athlete. Of course I do, but it's mainly I want Lincoln to, and my future children, to be able to go through life and handle stressful situations without getting flustered, without freaking out, or they might freak out, but they can handle the situation and what the problem is that they're faced with. And that's what I value, and I think it's a positive thing that I do with my kids. So anyway, if you have more questions, I like talking about how I raise Lincoln, because I think it's a pretty important, it's really important. So anyway, send me some emails, send me some questions. I'd love to answer them all, and at least give you my perspective on training and whatever else comes to mind.